Okay, so where we last left off, we had imported our DICOM file and selected the series we wanted to use. Now we are going to do two things in this video. We're going to crop the image to the part we're interested in. That will just help get rid of some excess anatomy, make it easier to edit, and most importantly, reduce the memory it needs to run. And then we're also going to apply the threshold filter to actually create our first 3D model. This will then be filtered down to isolate the anatomy segment we need. So we are in the DICOM data module. We're going to load our arterial file we decided we want to use. And next we want to go ahead and crop this volume. So I'm going to search for that. So we have our input as arterial. Our output, we're going to create a new volume. It'll just be called crop volume. So a couple things we have selected. We have our input volume, our input ROI, and then we also have our output, which is going to be the crop volume. So you want to be careful not to overcrop your volume. So here, if we zoom in using the window here, we want to make sure that we have both of the femoral heads in here. It's better to be a little bit more generous than to end up working on your volume and realizing you're missing an important segment. And we're not really interested in the lower leg, so we can cut off kind of just below the head of the tibia here. And go back, check it in a couple different views, like I'm scrolling through the coronal view here. Make sure I'm not missing any bone. I feel comfortable with this, so I'm going to go ahead and apply that filter. I mean that cropping. Okay, we are applied, so now we're ready to start segmentation. We're going to go to the segment editor, and we're going to select our input as our cropped volume. We don't really need the ROI anymore, so we can remove that. By deleting the control point, and that leaves us with just our volume. So a couple things about navigation here. These, of course, as I've been clicking on, you can scroll back and forth to zooming in on whatever view you want. This resets you to the middle of the image. Then you can also change what view you have, whether or not you can see that view, whether they're linked or not, as in whether they're scrolling together, which I like to have. To zoom in and out, you can either, if you have a touch screen, it's very convenient. You can just zoom with your fingers, or you can right click your mouse to move in and out and then move the image. So let's start our segmentation. We're going to add a segment. And first I want to segment the bilateral femurs. I'll later parse this into a left and right femur. And we're going to use the threshold tool, and we're going to try to isolate the bone. So let's zoom in here. You can apply your threshold range, the minimum and maximum, and this is based on the volume intensity. Your goal here is to really try to isolate as much bone as possible while reducing your tissue artifact. So the bone is the brightest, so we're going to do the max threshold. And we're going to try to eliminate the extra noise in the tissue. So we're just kind of scrolling through here. You want to try to capture as much bone as possible. You are going to have small segments here, whether that's calcium or blood vessels, but don't worry about that too much because we can get rid of it later. And it's easier to delete excess segments than try to fill in missing segments. So I'm just looking at this in a couple views. I want to make sure I have as much as I need, especially in the tibia, which can be hard, the femoral condyles, which can be hard to segment. I'm happy with this. So taking out my threshold about 88 to 1644, and I'm going to go ahead and apply it. And once it's applied, we can click Show 3D. And we can now see our 3D segment. It's important to note if you don't see it at first, you may have to zoom in or out. You can just reset the image using the axis right here. So let's zoom out and see what we have. You can see we have most of the femurs and pelvis, which you want, but there's a lot of noise. You can see there's blood vessels, there's parts of the table that were included here. So we can use the next tool, which is called islands, and we just want to keep the largest island, and hopefully this is going to get rid of some of these artifacts. So let's see what this does. Great, so we have gotten rid of the table and a lot of excess things. Now from here on out, unfortunately, you're going to have to manually segment out the important parts. It's not fun, takes a lot of time, but it's worth it for anatomical accuracy. There's a couple more things we can do though to zoom in on our interested segment. So we really don't need the pubic symphysis here. So we can use the scissor tool. This is used for erasing segments in the 3D space. So let's just start kind of cutting out what we don't need. You know, I definitely don't need this part here because it's not part of the femur. So you can erase that, and it looks like I can erase a little bit up here too, which is excess parts of the pelvis. Also get rid of some of these blood vessels, I think. So remember, this makes your cut in the 3D space. So just be careful you're not deleting the actual bone segment you need. So, you know, the rest of the blood vessels are pretty close to the bone, so that's about as comfortable as I feel. But we did make a lot of good progress. And so in our next video, we're going to talk about how we can use the actual CT to edit out this excess noise and try to isolate these femurs.